Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into something absolutely fascinating: how India's cultural and spiritual narratives use distinct visual grammars to bring ancient myths to life. We usually think of storytelling as just words on a page, right? But today, we are going to look at how stories are physically constructed. We'll trace this incredible journey from the macro scale, think monumental, immovable stone temples, all the way down to the micro canvas of the breathing human body in classical Indian theater. It's a literal transformation from stone to flesh, and I can't wait to unpack it with you.
So here's our roadmap for today. 1. The architecture of devotion. 2. The moving canvas. 3. Decoding the colors. And 4. Crowns and character. Let's jump right in.
Part 1. The architecture of devotion, the permanence of stone.
Just think about the sheer scale of devotion required to build the ancient shrines across India. We're talking about the 12 Jyotirlingas, like the ancient Shiva temple at Kedarnath perched way up high in the Himalayas, or Somnath right on the Arabian Sea coast. Then you have the massive Char Dham pilgrimage sites spanning the entire country. These are massive, enduring structures carved from permanent materials. We're looking at intricate marble carvings like you see at the Dilwara temples, or entire complexes like Kailasha at Ellora. That one was literally carved out of a single solid rock. The whole point here is permanence. They were designed to stand the test of time.
These awe-inspiring structures use a very rigid visual grammar of stone to create an eternal, immovable residence for the gods. Take the Brihadiswara temple, for instance. It features a towering 66-meter-tall vimana built entirely in granite. That is huge. Or look at the Meenakshi Amman temple with its 14 incredibly colorful gopurams. This architectural language relies on mass, scale, and unbreakable materials to communicate the divine. It's built to outlast generations, century after century.
But here's a really interesting question. How do these divine stories move from static stone to the ephemeral, breathing human body? How do you take the grandeur of a massive granite temple and shrink it down to fit on a human face? Well, the ultimate goal, as scholars of Kerala's traditional theater point out, is to completely elevate the performer into a living embodiment of the character.
Which brings us to Section 2, the moving canvas, Kerala's classical theater.
To understand this massive shift from stone to human, we really have to look at the concept of aharya. According to the ancient Natya Shastra, classical Indian theater is composed of several elements, and aharya is basically its visual heartbeat. Now, this is absolutely crucial. It's not just about throwing on a decorative costume for a play. Not at all. It's a highly codified visual grammar. Through meticulous makeup and incredibly heavy ornaments, an actor physically communicates their mood, their moral disposition, and their entire character with breathtaking immediacy directly to the audience.
But before the audience even sees a single thing on stage, there's a profoundly sacred preparation ritual that has to happen. This takes place in a quiet, backstage sanctum known as the Aniyara, or Nepathya. You can really think of this space as the theatrical equivalent of entering a temple's inner sanctum. It's this quiet crucible where the actors sheds their own personal identity. Through a mix of intense physical and spiritual preparation, the performer undergoes an absolute metamorphosis. They literally become a fully realized mythic persona.
And just look at the Angarachana, makeup ritual. It is the perfect contrast to the permanence of those stone temples we talked about earlier. Why? Because the materials are entirely natural and inherently temporary. First, you have maniola, which is a yellow pigment mixed with oil. Then, for the demonic characters, they apply kari. This is a deep black soot created from burnt sesame oil, or, in the Kudiyatam tradition, they actually use burnt coconut shell ash mixed with water to give it this really tactile texture. And finally, they add the chuti, which is the stark white outline that frames the face and turns it into a dynamic, moving canvas. These elements are meticulously applied for hours on end, only to be washed away at the very end of the night. It's a daily, dedicated act of recreation.
Moving on to Part 3, decoding the colors, rigid archetypes versus interpretive fluidity.
So while they share ancient roots, the classical forms of Kathakali and Kudiyatam use this visual grammar in very different ways. Kathakali actually emerged a bit later and was specifically designed to be accessible to the general public. Because of that, it amplifies theatricality through stylized uniformity and very rigid visual archetypes. Kudiyatam, on the other hand, is over a millennium old and was, for a long time, confined strictly to temple premises. Because of its unique history, it emphasizes really subtle interpretation and strict textual authenticity.
Let's break down Kathakali first. In Kathakali, color literally equals morality. It's an unbending system designed for instant audience recognition, kind of like the original good guy wears white, bad guy wears black trope, you know? If a character walks on stage with a pacha, or green face, you instantly know for sure that they represent absolute virtue and divinity. Sharp-lined Kathi makeup symbolizes those arrogant anti-heroes. A red beard, known as Chuvannathadi, signals aggressive power. A black face, embodied by Kari, signals dark, demonic forces. And finally, Minuku suggests a soft, gentle nature. It's a brilliantly readable visual code.
But watch what happens when we compare specific characters. Look at how Duryodhana exposes the differences between these two traditions. In Kathakali's rigid moral binary, he's explicitly marked as the arrogant villain with that sharp Kathi makeup. But in Kudiyattam, there's a total twist. He actually gets a noble green pacha face. Why on earth would they do that? Well, it's because Kudiyattam prioritizes the original text. In the specific playtext, the Dutavakya, Duryodhana is described as youthful, gem-adorned, luminous, and royal. So the Kudiyattam makeup reflects his royal bearing rather than just focusing on his villainous actions.
We see something similar with Bhima. In Kathakali, Bhima matches his virtuous brothers, the Pandavas, by wearing the noble pacha green makeup. Simple, right? But Kudiyattam totally breaks him away from his brothers visually. It gives him a red beard and the specific wig of Sugriva. Now, this isn't a mistake or an inconsistency. It's a highly deliberate choice to highlight his fierce, passionate inner temperament. It adds this immense psychological complexity to the portrayal that you just don't get with a simple color code.
Even the monkey brothers, Bali and Sugriva, are treated differently. Kathakali categorizes them both identically as Chuvannathadi, or red-bearded, which reflects their immense physical strength and impulsive nature. But Kudiyattam visually separates their inner natures. It gives Sugriva a virtuous makeup modeled after the pious Hanuman. And while Bali keeps the red beard, Kudiyattam actually applies a green base to his face. It's this fascinating visual attempt to reconcile his intense outward actions with his divine lineage and noble inner essence.
All right, Part 4, Crowns and Character, the Semiotics of Splendor.
Setting heavily above all these intricately painted faces are the crowns, or kirita. And even here, the aesthetics really diverge. Kathakali generally uses crowns based on the tiered Narayanakriti form. Kudiyattam, however, features the spherical Golakriti form. But here's the cool part. Beneath these obvious shape differences lies a deeply shared canonical structure. Both are dictated by ancient texts like the Tantra Samuchaya, giving them deep, shared ritual authority.
So what you should really take away from this is their deeply shared material culture. Despite looking aesthetically different, both crowns feature the exact same core elements. You have the Kesabaram hair mound, the Kalasham peaks, and the Makutam top ornament. They both use the elaborate Marumala chest necklaces to communicate power and authority, and they are all meticulously handcrafted from Kamij wood. These heavy, awe-inspiring ornaments prove that both of these traditions are basically two branches growing from the exact same ancient theatrical root.
So this entire journey from massive macro architecture to micro-human anatomy leaves us with a pretty compelling question. Think about it. Devotees spent centuries carving solid granite and marble to capture the divine in permanent stone structures. Meanwhile, performers spend hours every single night mixing soot and oil to capture that exact same divinity on their fleeting, breathing skin. So, what do you think? Is the eternal better experienced in the unmoving grandeur of a temple or in the transient, intensely personal metamorphosis of a human performance? It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for exploring this with me.